Welcome to the recorded version of the Memory Ensemble, using improvisation to improve quality of life for persons living with dementia, from March 13, 2018, part of the National Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Center webinar series sponsored by the Administration for Community Living.
Thanks so much, Steve. Welcome everyone to the webinar today on the Memory Ensemble. In this webinar series, the Administration for Community Living's National Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Center has partnered with the American Society on Aging. We're pleased to have all of you in attendance today. Before we start, Erin Long of the Administration for Community Living will provide a brief welcome. Erin?
Hi everyone. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us to learn about the Memory Ensemble. We're super excited that Drs. Morhart and Dunford have made themselves available to us and to you to share their work. We look forward to hearing from them, and I'll just send it back to you, Sari.
Thanks so much. So as you just heard, for today's webinar, we'll hear from Darby Morhart and Christine Mary Dunford. Darby is an associate professor for the Cognitive Neurology and Alzheimer's Disease Center and Department of Preventive Medicine at the Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. She leads the Alzheimer's Disease Center's outreach and recruitment, the Miller Alzheimer's Family Support Program, and social work services for the Northwestern Medicine Neurobehavior and Memory Clinic. Christine Dunford is a co-founder of the Memory Ensemble, is an ensemble member with the Lookingglass Theatre Company in Chicago, where she has acted in, written, adapted, or directed more than 24 original productions. Her adaptation of the novel Still Alice by Lisa Genova premiered at Lookingglass in 2013 and opened in England this last February. Christine's also an associate professor and director of the School of Theater and Music at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So without any further delay, let's turn it over to Darby Morhart and Christine Dunford.
Great. Thank you so much, Sari and Steve and Erin, for inviting Christine and I to participate in this webinar and to share the work on the Memory Ensemble. We're really so delighted to be here today. I am just going to introduce us a bit. This is the outline of our session today, a little introduction and background, and the history of the Memory Ensemble. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time on the design and the format and the improv principles that guide this work. As probably many of you know on this call, aging is the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, and with our aging population, we have a phenomenal over 5 million people living with Alzheimer's in this country, which could triple by the year 2050. People with a new diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease are being told to stay active and social engaged in life, and however, there are still, even over the many years that we have been diagnosing Alzheimer's and related dementias earlier and earlier, there still are very few activities that are designed specifically for persons in the early stages. So, and we do know that non-medical interventions can provide persons with dementia with a sense of purpose and meaning, and can build confidence and a sense of mastery, and potentially decrease depression. Art, Improvisation, and Dementia. There's this wonderful article by the National Endowment for the Arts. It's actually a toolkit called Creativity Matters, the Arts and Aging Toolkit, and that really illustrated that involving yourself in participatory arts programs such as music and drama and theater and storytelling and visual arts and dance has a positive effect on physical health and mental health and social functioning, regardless of cognitive ability. And that we do know that older adults with dementia experience a better quality of life when they participate in the creative arts, and also assume a shared identity with one another especially in the earliest stages of the illness. I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Darby. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the Memory Ensemble. It's a partnership between the Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine, the Cognitive Neurology and Alzheimer's Disease Center there, and Lookingglass Theatre Company. Lookingglass Theatre Company is we're 30 years old this year. We're a ensemble-based theater company in Chicago. We create mostly original works or adaptations of existing texts. Our work is often highly physical or visual, and we're concerned with the power of story to change, charge, and empower. I have. In addition to making new work and presenting new work, Lookingglass has a really robust education and community outreach programs, and I started working with our education and community outreach programs very close to our beginning in about 25, 27 years ago, and started thinking about how performance activities broadly can be used to work with different groups of people. And Darby and I were working on a separate, unrelated project in 2009, and I learned about some of the work that she was doing. I've always been fascinated with memory. I do not have, at the time, I hadn't had a family member or even a close friend who had experienced memory loss or that I knew of had Alzheimer's. I was younger then, and but I've always been fascinated by memory, and I became a fan of Darby and the work that she was doing at the Alzheimer's Disease Center. I learned about the Buddy program there, and which partners first-year medical students with people with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, where Darby, you can add on or correct as necessary.
No, that's right. That's absolutely right.
But I was fascinated because the mentors are actually, it's a mentorship program, and the mentors are the first-year medical students. I'm sorry, the mentors are the people with memory loss, and the mentees are the medical students, and she started a Culture Bus program. Then she's helped start with some other leadership at the center, a storytelling program. And I asked her, have you ever considered using performance? And she said, well, I have. I would love to. She actually created a video about it, a videotape, but she hadn't actually used performance activities as an intervention. She said, I'd love to, but I don't know how. And I said, I don't know how either, but maybe we can figure out together. So 2009, we started piloting the Memory Ensemble. It took us a number of years to refine the curriculum, and so I'll be talking more about what that actually is today. But it's simply a non-medical intervention that uses improvisational performance activities to improve quality of life for persons with early-stage Alzheimer's disease and related cognitive impairment. And we have 3 goals. One is to improve the quality of life for persons living with Alzheimer's disease and their families. The second is to investigate the benefits of this intervention, and this is a research study. And we've been conducting research since the very beginning. And then to translate these benefits to other communities, which we can talk a little bit more about later.
Yeah.
And
yeah, so the research design, our question is, what impact does a performance-based improvisational intervention have on quality of life of individuals in the early to moderate stages of Alzheimer's or related dementia? We were really looking at our hypothesis is that in an atmosphere free from the concerns of making mistakes or questioning decisions, this memory ensemble intervention will promote, we felt, self-confidence and self-esteem, social engagement, creative expression, cognitive stimulation, and enhanced mood for the participants. We set up some inclusion criteria, which was similar to the inclusion criteria I was using with other quality of life enrichment programs that Christine was mentioning, and that is that the person needed to have a diagnosis of early to moderate Alzheimer's or related cognitive impairment, and we have since also changed that to persons with mild cognitive impairment as well. An understanding or basic understanding of the program and willingness to participate, and sufficient ability to follow directions and understand the facilitators and one another in the room. And so the exclusion criteria is simply that we're not able to really involve people that have impairments that are going to require staff assistance or supervision, functional impairments such as needing help with toileting, any psychiatric disabilities that would be disruptive in the program, like delusions, hallucinations, the inability to follow directions, and or the inability to remain, in attention for the 90-minute session. So the staff of the program, we have teaching artists. So a social worker is always involved. We have a note taker, volunteers, and we also have teaching artists in training. Our quantitative measure was the Smiley face scale. It's a 5-point scale that we do at the beginning of every session and after the session is over. And our qualitative methods are field notes. We have the note taker taking field notes throughout each session, and we code those for themes. And then we also conduct post-session focus groups for the participants and also for the family members. So Christine's going to describe the program. Yeah.
It's fairly simple. We have a workshop series of 7 to 9 sessions, I think for all 8 years. We've met on Monday mornings for 90-minute sessions each. We have found that it's best to have a minimum of about 6 participants. It can go up to 14 participants and still work very well. As Darby was saying, we do have at least 2 facilitators in the room at all times, and these include I like to say a master teaching artist, which is a term that I've made up, but simply I mean a teaching artist who has been teaching for long enough to understand objective-based teaching, so that they can focus on, and that they have an extensive enough toolbox of activities that they can switch up an activity, improvise an activity, or even make up a whole new activity in the moment, so that they are not really worrying about how to teach. They're worrying about focusing on what they're actually trying to accomplish and then adjusting their teaching to that. So I call that master teaching artist. It's generally, most of our teaching artists have been teaching for between 10 and 20 years. And then a social worker, or somebody who simply knows the medical side of things in the room. And we can talk later about why I think it's important to have both of those people in the room. We have found that it's been really important to maintain some elements of the program. Every time we get together, we try to have the same room. Occasionally we can't, but we have really good signage if we don't. But having the same room or a familiar setting that remains constant has been very important. We have the same welcome sign. For many years it was a handwritten sign that became beloved, but then we changed it to a printed sign. And then I write welcome on the board in my handwriting every time, so that's a familiar signpost for everyone. We always start with chairs in a circle. The smiley face sheets and name tags are always in the same place. When people enter, they're welcomed and invited to circle the face that matches how they're feeling right now and put on a name tag. Of course, it's always the same people in the room. I guess it's not, of course. we do form an ensemble, and we keep the same cohort of people throughout a 7 to 9 session workshop series. So people really do get to know each other quite well, get to develop trust and understanding about each other. And then the session format itself stays the same, remains constant for each of the sessions. And Darby, I think, should we go to the next slide?
Yeah, and go to the next slide. And yeah, the participant, there's just the basic demographics here. Is, we have had 69 participants over 15 sessions, and our mean age 72 with an average MMSE score of 23. We've had slightly more males than females, and our population has been largely white, Caucasian, with some African American and other. And this is where the teaching artists, we've been doing a lot. We've been reaching out to underrepresented groups and teaching artists who can help work and help spread the Memory Ensemble in other communities. And so we have been teaching and training Latino and African American teaching artists to take this program elsewhere. I also want to say that as Christine alluded to, she was not that familiar with dementia prior to getting involved in the Memory Ensemble. And so we did do some training here through the Northwestern Alzheimer Center, and that we do a training with all of the teaching artists when they, I guess, enroll or begin their training. So just to really go into the ins and outs of dementia, and also person-centered care principles, communication issues. And our participants for the Memory Ensemble that are describing here are referred from the Northwestern Alzheimer Center Research and our Neurobehavior and Memory Clinic. Our diagnoses, you can see, are largely Alzheimer's disease, some MCI, with the second most common is mild cognitive impairment. We are a center that sees a number of people with frontotemporal degeneration and vascular dementia and Lewy body disease. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Christine.
Thanks, Darby. Why improvisation? When we started, we didn't know we would turn to improvisation, but it became very clear very quickly that we needed performance activities that used the strengths of participants. And one of their strengths is that they are, all the participants are very good at being in the moment. Improvisation, just very simply, we think of it as the practice of making, inventing, or arranging out of what is conveniently at hand. It is unscripted. There's no memorization required. There's no right or wrong answers. There are right or wrong ways of working, which we'll talk a little bit about, but no experience is necessary. It uses, and it actually develops, which I think is a remarkable part of the program, skills and abilities that are maintained despite memory loss. So people actually develop expertise as improvisers during the course of a Memory Ensemble workshop series. But the skills that we use are observation, listening, focus and concentration, the ability to respond spontaneously, imagination, and that they must trust themselves and take risks and trust others in the room and take risks. And all of this work relies on being in relationship in the moment with another person, at least one other person. It allows for a safe and challenging and supportive environment. And this is what I like to say is that over and over again, we intentionally, in a safe and challenging environment, put people in a place in moments where they don't have a correct answer, when they don't have an answer, and they must develop the skills to be in the moment and to improvise an answer. And I think this program just sees people with dementia for their creative potential and meaningful contributions rather than for what they have lost or for their loss. And then Darby, I think, unless you have something to add, we can go.
Yeah.
And just start to look at and maybe compare a little bit the support and improvisation principles that that we engage in the work. I've learned through Darby and this work a little bit about person-centered care principles, and they include, of course, treating people with dignity and respect, supporting personal perspectives, values, beliefs, preferences, listening, and working in partnership. Early on, I was struck by how closely these match improvisational principles, which I'm sure we probably have some improvisers listening who know that a foundational principle in all improv is to say yes to what is proposed, and then actually to go on and say, to build on that, say yes and, to add to whatever is proposed. In improvisation, we work on making statements rather than asking questions, and we accept there are no mistakes. We accept mistakes as opportunities, and we can talk about some examples of that a little bit later in the examples of the activities that we do. And then some things that we've added on that are particular to the Memory Ensemble work is that we work with whatever is in the room, quite literally. So whatever's right in front of us. We lean away from exaggeration and hyperbole. I have a lot of improviser friends who lean toward exaggeration. So if they're in a scene where someone is expressing anxiety, an improviser might go to the height of anxiety. They're very, very anxious, or they're very, very cold, or they're very, very angry. We lean away from that, and we work with what's literally right in front of us. We tell people they do not have to be funny or smart or clever, and we never work toward being funny or smart or clever. It happens. People are funny, smart, and clever, but it's never an objective. And
so we're going
to might be a typo, the last one. Work with what is not in the room. We don't work with. We only work with what's in the room.
What's in the room, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to go on to the session format. And please go ahead and tell them about what happens in each session.
Okay. So each session, like I said earlier, the elements remain constant. These are some of the elements that remain constant. We always start with a structured check-in activity. People are sitting in chairs, and we have a prompt, which I'll explain a little bit more later. If my feelings were color, I would be feeling this color because. Then we do a warm-up activity, which involves physical, vocal, and social activity. We breathe, we gently stretch, and we use our imagination. Then we go into a warm-up activity that involves observation, listening, and focus. So the first one is mostly physical. The second one starts to turn to observation, listening, and focusing. So cognitive skills. And then we do an activity that's skill building. And here is where we're introducing or reinforcing improvisational concepts and skills. And we do this through activities like a game called Yes It Is. The first 3 sessions, we introduce skills of building trust, establishing a performance community and vocabulary, and introducing the concept of working with what's in relationship with what's right in front of us, and saying yes. And then after we've completed those first 3 sessions, which have a very set curriculum, we go on to introduce the idea of activity, location, and character in the following sessions. So those are foundational elements of conducting improv or engaging in improv that we actually introduce to participants. But there's a skill building section. Then we go to a more advanced section where we integrate multiple skills that we've explored that day to a more advanced activity. We have a motto, and we recite it together at every session, and then we also process or discuss between activities, not all activities, but between many activities during each session, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and then we discuss at the end of the entire session. And then we have our checkout, which is a repeat of the check-in activity. If my feelings are color, I'll be feeling this color because. So that is the session. So just going into a few examples of activities. We started to talk about this already. Participants narrate their emotional state at the beginning and in the end of each session. If my feelings were a color, I would be feeling. Some people don't have metaphor. If they don't have metaphor, access to metaphor, we will change this prompt to something like, I'm feeling happy. A color that goes with the feeling of happy is, and then they'll name a color. That generally works. If someone, almost always someone will have a color. If they don't, then we will ask them to describe, to share a word that describes how they're feeling right then. And then we will move on to, I'll just give you some examples of some of the warm-up activities that we do. One is just talking, give you an example of one of the physical warm-up activities. There's this stretch that we call the Tin Man or Tin Woman stretch. I ask everyone about the Tin Man, someone to tell the story of the Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz, and someone will share the Tin Man is the Tin Man who's all made of tin, and I say what happens to the Tin Man rusts, and then we all pretend we're tin men and tin women, and we use, first of all, we start by taking, every warm-up activity we start by taking 3 deep breaths, one shallow, one deeper, one deepest. And then this is the gentle stretching by doing the Tin Man or Tin Wood Woman stretch. We imagine putting warm oil in our finger joints. So imagine your hands above your head and you're moving your fingers. And everyone who's listening could actually do this if you want. You could put your hands above your heads and imagine putting warm oil in your finger joints. And then imagine putting warm oil in your wrist joints while you're moving your wrists. And then imagine putting warm oil in your elbow joints and the shoulder joints, then we move down the body. So that engages both, and then at the end we would breathe 3 more times. That engages breath, gentle stretching, and imagination. Another simple activity which many people I'm sure are familiar with is the idea of going on a picnic. If we're going on a picnic together, we're going to imagine we're going to pretend that we're going on a picnic. We have to reach high up in the air to get our backpack off the top shelf. And then we're going to reach down to the ground and put our backpack on the ground. Then we're going to reach far over to the right using our left hand to get an apple from the refrigerator, etc. So you get the idea. We use breath, stretching, and imagination. Then we'll do a warm-up activity that is uses observation, listening, and focus. A very familiar one is a mirror game, mirror activity. I don't usually like to call them games. Where it starts generally as a group, so everyone's in a circle. Someone will just, one of the facilitators will start to perhaps move their hands up and down in front of their body. The other participants will be invited to mirror that. So everyone is having to observe closely to match as closely as they can. And that actually could then progress to pair mirroring, where each participant faces a partner and takes time letting go and accepting leadership in that. So those are some examples of some of the warm-up activities that we do. And now, Darby, we can move on to, skill-building activities. So these are the core activities that I think if people are not familiar with them, again, many of the listeners might be familiar with these things or versions of them. But these are the activities, particularly the first one, yes it is, they're at the core of all the work that we do. And yes it is a classic improvisational activity. And I'll just describe it, and maybe people can play along with us if you want. So the way it works is everyone is standing in a circle. There are objects on the way I play it. Different people do it differently, but the way I do it, there are objects in the middle of the room. This could be objects that are simply collected from whatever people brought that day, a checkbook, a scarf, a pen, some keys, a cup, the cover of the tray from the catering. You stick it in the middle of the floor, and then people take turns. The first facilitator goes into the middle of the room, picks up one of the objects. Let's say it's a piece of paper. Now we all have a piece of paper. If you can, I want to invite you to take a piece of paper, hold it in your hand, and then stick it above your head, high above your head. And then I would say, pretend that that paper is something else. What could that paper be? And if it's above your head, and you're a participant, you might say, it's a cloud in the sky. And then
yes, it is.
Everyone would do just what Darby did. They would shout and say, yes, it is. Now I'm holding the paper next to my earlobe, and I would say, this is an earring, and Darby and everyone would shout,
yes,
yes,
it is.
It is. And now I'd say, now somebody's getting confused. They don't know what to do with this piece of paper. It's too literal. So then I say, well, stick it under your bottom, and or stick it under your shoe. So then they put it under their shoe, and then they say, oh, this is a skateboard. And everyone
yes,
will
it
shout,
is.
yes, it is. And then I just went, so now I'm going to put my object down in the middle of the floor, and I'm going to pick up another object, and it's a paper cup that's colored red, and I'm going to hand it to Darby, and Darby's going to do 3 things with it. Darby, are you up for this?
Well, I think we have to move on.
Oh, do we? Darn it. Okay,
yes.
You get the idea. And then another activity, so charade, so that's at the core of all the work that we do. So what happens there? Let's just think about it really quickly. What happens there? Somebody picked up an object, looked at it, and this is how we would process it afterwards. Say, what did you notice? What did you experience doing this activity? And somebody would inevitably say, everybody shouted yes at me. And then we say, yes, that's at the core of all the work we do. And then somebody will inevitably say, I felt nervous. And I'll say, how many people felt anxious or nervous at any point during this? And people will raise their hands. And I'll say, and then what happened after you felt nervous? And then someone would say, well, I just looked at the object. And then what happened? Well, then an idea came. And then what happened? And then I shared my idea. And then what happened? People shouted yes at me. And that's at the core of all the work that we do. But we have this moment of anxiety where we don't have an answer is really important. And this is what we do over and over again in Memory Ensemble. We create moments of anxiety intentionally in a safe and challenging environment for participants where they have to do something. They don't have an answer, and they have to stop, breathe, observe, turn to their imagination, and let an idea come. Say yes to that idea, and then act on it. And that's as simple and as complex, actually, as the entire program. So you've moved on, Darby, so I'm thinking, oh yeah, to the prompts. So this is what we say at the end of each activity. What did you notice? What did you experience?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of every session, we say, what are your thoughts or feelings about the work we did today? And how does what we did today relate to your life? And then here's our motto that we say at every session.
Yes, and then we also have, and you can have this, you'll be able to download, but you can see the metaphor check-in and check-out where people are from dark gray to bright green, I'm struggling, I'm neutral like white to bright yellow. I mean, it is pretty consistent from session to session that they come in one color but leave a much brighter, happier color. And so I'm just going to dig into the themes a little bit here. We found that in our coding resulted in the themes of the individual having some initial uncertainty from the beginning, but an increase in mood and confidence over time within the session and over the weeks. Definitely a a sense of connection and community, and a feeling that they are successful in this process. So just some quotes here. Well, I think I'm more concrete than I'd like to think. So performing, I thought, am I going to do it wrong or not? Am I going to come up with something as creative as this person or that person? Even when Christine asked me if I was up for this, that initial uncertainty, and I certainly experienced that whenever she asked me that question. Increased mood and confidence. Being free to move and not feel self-conscious as I normally am. This is developing a different side of myself, and I can still learn new things and do new things. A sense of connection and community. I felt trust and friendship, security. It's like we were all on a ship or something. We would want everybody to keep it from sinking. So again, that sense of belonging to others within the group. The sense of cultivating success. And this really has a lot to do with Christine and the other teaching artists. This is what they develop in the room, and this is really the culture that they create. So it's their encouragement that is such a huge part of this process. Today was a huge day today. We took big steps forward. I just want to say thank you to all those of you for playing, because 90% is just showing up and saying yes and trying something new, and you all did it. This is all about trusting yourself and the ideas that come to you, and trusting other people will be there with you. So that is really a key piece. The Smiley Face Scale results. This is the Smiley Face Scale. It's basically we ask people to circle one as they walk in the door and then circle it again as they're walking out. And actually this work, and this is our quantitative measure for our work, and it is statistically significant that we found from session to session. And then Christine, I know that there's a lot of facilitator lessons learned here. So do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I know we're running out of time, so I'm just going to try to think about what might be most important, or I'll go quickly. 2 steps. Some of the things that we've learned, and it took us a long time to learn some of these, and now they seem obvious, but to engage in activities that can be led by giving only 1 or 2 step directions at a time. Don't require anyone to remember that they have to do anything basically more than stand up and walk to the front of the room. Model show activities by modeling with another facilitator or participant first. Use the most familiar words, or use multiple words. So you've heard me throughout even the short session use words like imagine, but then also use pretend, observe, look closely, see. So saying things multiple ways and using the most familiar words. Providing ongoing positive feedback and support. I think that's probably obvious to everyone. But we generously use non-evaluative and supportive feedback like yes, okay, thank you, but I say it with authentic enthusiasm. You're doing it, and avoid things like very good, great, excellent, wonderful. We learned early on that people can compare themselves to others and then start to doubt, and so keeping things non-evaluative and supportive has been really helpful. We challenge and we don't let participants off the hook too easily, and I think this is really important. If I can tell that somebody's working on something and it's just taking them a little longer, or I'll rephrase a question so that they can participate, but I don't provide answers easily. However, I always provide an authentic way out, or a way for them to participate successfully. Keep the pace up. We run a relaxed but highly focused room and with a steady pace. We check in a lot. When in doubt, we start with description, and we work with participants to start with description. I see you passing an apple. I see you standing up and moving from that chair to the front of the room, and we stick with the literal rather than actually metaphor or exaggerating. Like, we're not going to go have a scene on Mars unless they take us to Mars, and then we go there. And then in terms of facilitators, the best facilitators, the most successful, are really, they stick with what they want to accomplish or teach, but they're willing to change how they teach it, and they're able to adjust activities on the fly.
Yeah. Yes. And So overall, our results are showing that the sessions do yield feelings of success, optimism, hope, a sense of normalcy, increased confidence, a reduction in the feeling of stigma, increased connection, and a sense of empowerment. And one participant said it's a no-brainer, excuse the pun. So I think at this point, we could go to, we have a short video. We create a video after each session. And at the second half of the last session, we invite friends and family to participate in the Memory Ensemble, and we show the video of the work that had been done over the past 6 to 9 weeks. So I think we could go, if we could go forward with that.
Yes, here it comes.
Thank you. Okay, and I think that really concludes our session. The next few slides are some resources and readings that we've compiled for you, and I know that this is really only scratching the surface of what is available and written. And then just some acknowledgments. We want to acknowledge our participants and their families, all of the teaching artists. Our note taker is a very valuable person, our social workers, staff, and our funding from the Miller Family Support Program and the National Institute on Aging. So with that, we will conclude.
Great. Thanks so much, Darby and Christine. We're so thankful for your presentation, and we are getting some questions in, received some as you were speaking, and folks can feel free to enter more questions into the question and answer section of the webinar platform. And we'll get started with some of the questions that already came in while others are assembling theirs. We had quite a few questions about the Smiley face tool. Some people were asking what it actually is showing, what they're actually putting on that tool, and does the Smiley face indicator, is it modified based on the activities you're using? Do you use it every time? Do you only use it when you do certain activities? If you could talk a little bit more about how the tool is used, that would be great.
Well, maybe I'll just start, Christine, and you could fill in if whether or not you use it in the session, because basically it was really it was a measure that we chose to just see quantitatively how we could measure what's happening as a result of the Memory Ensemble. And we really got this from the Meet Me at MoMA program, and this was used in the evaluation of that. Dr. Mary Middleman had used it, and I thought it was a nice, simple way of just demonstrating. But I'm not sure that it's being used in the session, because Christine can speak to that.
We do not use it in the session. We use it to assess and compare people's where they are when they come in, and then right before they exit. We use discussion during the session to check in with how people are doing and what they're thinking, rather than the smiley face.
Okay, thanks so much for that. Darby, can you talk a little bit about why professionals who are knowledgeable in dementia why are they important for co-facilitation and programs like the Memory Ensemble and others, as opposed to just using maybe the artist, the teaching artist?
Well, we decided this early on because I think basically because the teaching artists were not that knowledgeable about dementia. And also the social workers within our center really know these patients and families and know their diagnoses and know what their strengths are, where they may not. And they're able to kind of help interpret some of the behavior or some of the responses that the teaching artists, because of their just maybe lack of awareness of the dementia. So this is just something that we thought would be helpful, and we've really seen how beneficial that is to have someone with that knowledge in the room. Certainly be up for a good discussion to have, and maybe a good test to see if it is actually necessary. We haven't tried that, but a good question.
Well, from being in the room, I can tell you that there have been and I've been doing this for a while now, so much of it is familiar to me, but it took a while. And there have been many times when we do a debrief after every session with the facilitators, and there have been many times when having the clinical social work in the room, they were able to explain just to contextualize somebody's choices or behavior, so I could understand it better. And then the other thing that happens sometimes is during the work, sometimes we'll learn things like somebody has misplaced their checkbook and hasn't told anyone. And that's not something that a facilitator can or should take care of, but somebody else might be able to take care of it outside the room. So things come up as well.
Great, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about if an IRB was needed for this work or informed consent in terms of the research protocol?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it's been IRB approved from the beginning.
Okay. And we also had a question about, a few questions about if you can talk a little bit more about how the social worker is involved in the program and what kind of work that social worker does with the participants.
Christine?
So they're in the room and they do everything. They actually become expert. They develop expertise in facilitation as well over time. They're co-facilitators. Everybody in the room does everything. So in addition to helping the teaching artists understand what's happening with patients when necessary after sessions, they also help actually with logistics a lot, things like helping people communicate, find the room. We do a exit the room, finding a care partner or the bus they need to take, make the phone call that needs to be made, things like that.
Great. We have quite a few questions about if the Memory Ensemble is available for replication in other communities, and if not, could you provide some guidance on some first steps that folks can take if they want to look into a similar program?
Christine?
Well, we have aspirations to do a train the trainer as soon as we can, and I'm always available to just talk to people. There's not a lot that can be done over the phone, but when people have basic or have experience with improvisation, it sometimes doesn't take very much for me to at least get them launched, share as much as I can so that they can start to do some work on their own with confidence. I don't know if that answers the question. We're also writing up a manual that we hope to have available.
Okay, and when the arrangement with Lookingglass Theatre was initiated, some of the folks are asking, did they have to get paid to use the theater and all the resources? Did you get grant money for that? How did you arrange that relationship?
So the Northwestern finds the room, and actually we do
pay, I volunteer, but we pay, part of my research, but we pay teaching artists a fee through funding through the Alzheimer's Center. Darby, you can talk about this. There's been some fundraising from organizations, but also from individuals. And at one point we were part of a civic practice lab grant that Lookingglass got. So we've gotten funding from different sources. Darby?
Right, that's exactly right. And so the funding that we now have through the Miller Foundation has really helped to give us, more consistent funding for the teaching artists that we are training. And Christine has been volunteering her time all these years, but certainly we do pay the note taker and we pay the teaching artists. And then the room is a room in the Northwestern university or hospital space, whatever we can find. And
Great.
That's not a cost to us.
Okay. There's a few questions about how you can involve people who have dementia, to what point you're able to involve them. Can you involve them when they're no longer forming sentences or communicating easily? Do you stop before them? How do you transition folks out of the program if it's no longer appropriate?
Yeah, I saw that question come through, and that's always a touchy thing for in many areas of this work. And we have found that even as people become more impaired in their maybe daily life and functioning, they're still able to participate in the memory ensemble. So I really take my cues from the teaching artist and the social worker in the room. If someone is really getting up and really not able to stay within the 90-minute session, then that really is telling us that they probably would benefit from being in another type of program, and we can help. And that's the social workers are available to all the families to help counsel them regarding those next steps. Christine, do you have anything you would like to add to that?
No, we'll keep people in the rooms. No, that was exactly. And we have a nice, convenient way that we happened upon to graduate people out of the rooms, and that is that we just have a break between series of sessions, so that we never have to ask somebody to stop participating, really. Mm-hmm. It happens more organically.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about how you may or may not involve family members, care partners, caregivers in this program?
Yes. Well, first of all, a lot of caregivers, care partners, not everyone come with the participant, and that we have found that they are building networks and sharing during the 90-minute session, so that's one way that they're involved. They are involved in the final session, the last 45 minutes. There's a show and share, and that, off and on, that's the extent of it right now. But we do, Darby and I and others have talked about how valuable it would be. Oh, we share a take-home, like they get a handout after each session that describes what we did during that session, and caregivers can often talk about those or do some of those exercises with their family member outside the room. But I think that we would really like, when we have the capacity to, I love the idea of a concurrent session with caregivers happening at the same time, covering the same content, but not having them be in the same room. So those are some of the ideas that we've had, and that's how we involve them now.
And they're involved in the focus groups. They really do give us some feedback about, and it's been consistently that they really see a big difference, especially that day of the memory ensemble. They really see a difference in the mood of their family member.
Great, thank you. Can you talk briefly about what is included in the training of the teaching artists?
Yes, so Darby said they do all get, yes, Darby.
No, go ahead. Do you mean the dementia training or the training of the improv training that Christine does. The dementia training? Oh, it's your basic dementia training. I mean, it's really just going through the different types of dementias, some discussion about the subjective experience, and maybe some videotapes of people talking about what being diagnosed with an illness means and has had on their lives, videotapes of caregivers talking about this, really kind of immersing them in this world of what it's like to have a neurocognitive impairment and what it's like to live with it, as much as we're able to do within a training session. And then, and again, those person-centered care principles that were talked about earlier. So if anybody wants to talk with me about what, wants to see some of that work that we've culled together, I'm happy to share that.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. There was a question about the video, and if those were some of your participants, and was that filmed at one of your sessions, and or were those others that were filmed?
Yes, that was just our last session that we had, our winter 2018 session. It just ended, and those pictures were taken throughout was it a 7 or 8 week session, and then pulled together through iMovie. Really, very homemade, but we pulled together, put a little music, and then we show it at the last session. So that was, brand new.
Well, everyone really seemed to like it, so thank you for putting that into the presentation. So we have pretty much reached the end of our time together today. I wanted to thank you both again for your presentations on the Memory Ensemble. And we'll have another webinar on April 10th on trauma-informed care for people living with dementia, so we hope that you'll join us for that. The registration information is available on the ASA's website. And Steve, I will turn it over to you for any final remarks.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. It's time for us to wrap